Well, hey guys, welcome to Align Online. It's so good to have you with us today.
Hey,
We're really excited to be here with you. My name's Graylin, and I am joined today by none other than the man, Mr. Josh Boyer. Josh Boyer, say what's up to our listeners today.
hey, what's up, everybody? Good to be here with you again.
Well, we are extremely excited about today's topic. But before we go any further, we want to just allow a few minutes for some of our listeners to join in. So as you're coming in, we always encourage you to please send us just a quick post about who you are, where you're from. Yeah, tell us your name, and we're gonna jump into this here shortly. So just tell us who you are and where you're listening
Mhm.
from.
Cool. Really quick, Graylin, as I'm listening, I think I've got a really big delay. I don't know if you noticed. So if my responses to you are like, there's an awkward pause between when you stop talking and when I start, it's because I'm hearing a really big delay. So keep going, but just so you know, that's what I'm noticing as we go. So jump into it, but just know there may be a little bit of a gap. So
Okay, man. Thank you for letting me know. So this will be fun. We
yeah,
we this is not our first rodeo when it comes to technical issues, but we're prepared to move forward either way. So thank Josh for letting me know. We're gonna wait just a couple more minutes here, probably about a minute more to get some folks in, and then we're gonna transition over into just a quick review of some of our previous foundations that we've been discussing over the past couple weeks. So.
that's right. So if you were with us in the previous weeks, we've been talking about our foundations of leadership. These are like the, you could call them foundational beliefs or our approaches, our values. These are the things that to us are like, this is the foundation, the bedrock, the bare minimum, like for us as we approach the word leadership or working with other leaders or organizations to transform their culture or transform the way they lead. We're like, we've got to talk about these things first. So that's what we've been
Mhm.
doing in this 4-week series. The first week we talked about how we have a foundational principle, a foundation of leadership called everyone can lead. And that one we unpacked how really it's not everyone, leadership isn't a trait you're born with. It's not this genetic trait, and there's not one particular prototype that we're all trying to get ourselves into. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's more about identifying who you are naturally and who you are naturally, and just building on that. And so if you are this type of personality, if you are this type of person, you've got these types of gifts and strengths, then just learn to lead in that, out of who you are, not trying to be somebody else. And then last week we talked about how everyone has intrinsic value. That was our foundational principle number
Yeah, that's
two.
great.
And Graylin, remind us what that one was all about.
Yeah, it's like this isn't something that you have to earn. This isn't accomplish. Your value isn't measured through your task or your production. You're born with this. You walk in really to any situation, but in a professional environment, you walk into this with value, and it's our responsibility, as your peer, as a leader of your organization, to draw attention to that value, to draw it out of you. And honestly,
Yeah,
we're better for it when we work very diligently to reach out to those people and draw those incredibly just intrinsic values out of them. But then our organizations are better as well because you begin to see people's giftings and
yeah,
who they are. So you walk into every situation with value. It's not something that
yeah,
you can earn through hard skills or anything else. And so
yeah. That's so
it's
good.
foundational for us. So.
Yeah, we're pushing ourselves and our peers around us to lead out of a knowledge and a belief in our own value versus trying to earn it through anything, accomplishment, or trying to prove ourselves or whatever. And we're trying to call it out in others. I love that. Yeah. So that was a quick recap of the last couple weeks. before we jump into today, we got some exciting things coming up. It's even closer. We've been saying just around the corner for a couple of weeks now, but now it's like truly coming up.
Yes.
We've
Yeah.
got
So GLS. The Global Leadership Summit. Thanks for getting that up there for us, man. August 6th and 7th, guys. There's still time to register. I believe there's still promotions on ticket sales, whether you're coming in as an individual or you're coming in with a group of people. This is an incredible opportunity. So why is Alignment Leadership promoting this? We are promoting this because this year we are partnering with ABBA as the title sponsor for GLS Austin. So we do simulcast, they do simulcast all over the nation, and there's multiple going on, in the state of Texas. But one of the largest ones that is held anywhere is in Austin, Texas, with ABBA. And this year, Alignment Leadership gets to be the title sponsor. And so again, that's out of our desire to be a resource to leaders and ensure that even if it isn't us providing the content, we get to work hand in hand with the city of Austin and other like-minded leaders to provide these resources. And so, man, we love you. We'd love for you guys to come and be a part of it. You will leave better for it. So
that's good.
GLS, August 6th and 7th. There's still time to register.
And on that note, Graylan, I think it even just affirms just our deep belief in the power of leadership in general. And what I love about GLS is that it draws leaders from like all industries. And so we believe in leaders getting healthier, stronger, learning to lead better. We believe anyone can lead and anyone can learn to lead. So we love seeing resources that equip leaders like that. And just thinking about this, if you think about the systemic impact of all industries, leaders growing better. And you think about, I think about cities, I think about Austin specifically, and Austin growing as a city as leaders grow, and just thinking like across all these industries, from nonprofit organizations to the business world to education. I mean, there's just like, man, I just think there's going to be the ripple effect, I think is huge. And that's what we want to see, is just like people elevated, and organizations just across the city, across our nation, and the world, really through this GLS event, transformed. So we believe in it, we love it, and good things are going to happen. So all right.
So we got a little icebreaker coming up. I'm excited about this, Josh. So give us the rules of engagement, man.
The rules of engagement. So here's what I'm gonna do. So this is kind of like a word association game, and we'll see if something kind of like interesting kind of comes out of this. It won't take long, just a brief minute here before we jump into what we're gonna unpack today with our next foundation. So I'll say a word, and then if you're following along, type in what your response is in the comments. So I'll just say one word, and you just tell me the first. I guess you could say character or thing that comes to mind. So the word is Barney. Barney, Barney. What's the first thing or character that comes to mind? Graylan, what's it make you think of?
Well, we've had this conversation a couple of times. When I think of Barney's, I think I add an S to the end of it, and it reminds me of this store that I used to like. We would go and hang out as teenagers in the Houston Galleria Mall, and they had this store named Barney's, and I always like thought it was fascinating because like at that time Barney the dinosaur was also really popular. But there's this really high-end fashion retailer in the Houston Galleria that we actually went in one time and just kind of looked at the price tags and turned around and went back out. Like, as a 16-year-old kid with like just enough money for some food court
there you go.
lunch, it's like I shouldn't be in here. But Barney's high-end retail Galleria Mall, Houston, Texas.
All right. You're like, I'll wait till it comes on the rack at Ross or TJ Maxx. That's me. That's bargain shopping. All right, so Graylan cheated, added an S on the end of the word. Barney's high-end retail. All right, cool. So, and I see a few comments, people thinking purple dinosaur. Graylan's answer is way cooler. All right, it's true. Graylan is He supersedes me in coolness. Absolutely. Purple dinosaur. So here's a couple things that maybe other people might have thought of. We've got Barney Fife from the Andy Griffith Show, a classic black and white show from, I don't know, when was that? 50s, 60s? It was a long time ago, right? Barney is Fred Flintstone's best friend, right? So jumping up into, I don't know, that cartoon is also ages old. I remember watching that as a kid. Of course, the purple dinosaur. What else? What other associations are there around the word Barney?
So we got Barney Rubble, we got Barney Fife.
Barney Fife, yeah.
We've got Barney the dinosaur.
Barney.
I think that in my just Rolodex, I think that's about all of my associations.
I'm
with
sure
Barney.
there's more out there. So the point of it all, though, is this: when you say a word, it's words can trigger memories, experiences. It can trigger people, like even in terms of like certain beliefs they might hold or opinions they might hold about one thing. So as we're sitting here today saying, hey, we're going to talk about a third foundational principle of leadership, and we're going to talk about our definition of leadership, I think it's important to just point out the fact that you say a word like leader or lead or leadership, and people in all across our community here, but even if you think about I'm speaking to our community here, those that you influence, everyone's going to really have a different association with that word, a different experience, different background. It could be positive, negative, neutral. It could be, just a whole bunch of things in between. So it's really key, though, to understand that people have different associations with words, and it's important that we all have conversations about these kinds of words that are important to us when we're trying to shape our culture or when we're trying to influence people on our teams. Right. Is that we have a shared definition of a word. So when we're trying to when we're trying to shift the culture, when we're trying to cultivate the culture, we've got to make sure that we have a shared definition, especially if you want everyone to have a full comprehension of the word, like the way that when the word comes to your mind, what you're thinking. And it's good to hear what other people think of when they think of that word, so that you're intaking their stories too. Yeah. And together you're kind of like, you're really shaping the definition so that everyone has full comprehension of, this is what we mean. This is what we talk about when we say this word. And once you have that full comprehension, then you can actually commit to something. So, Graylin, you and I talked about this a lot. And I remember like one of the first, going back to iterations of like our first leadership academy, you and I were leading together. We spent a lot of time on this concept, didn't we?
Yeah. There's something powerful about shared language.
Yeah.
And honestly, man, if you're going to take an attempt to take people on a journey or give them something, to grab a hold of, you really serve them well. If you can define it and provide it, it creates an opportunity for fluency where you want people to, to be able to live these things out and communicate the same way or language. I mean, you have to define it. You have to be really clear about it and intentional about it. So, we can't go any further. And so with alignment leadership, where I was talking about, we want to redefine leadership. We're redefining leadership. Well, we can't do that, and you can't come with us if we don't take the time to really define these things. So it's important,
fluency,
man.
That's a great word. Fluency, and I think about, especially as someone who lived out of the United States for 7 years, fluency. When I think about that, that's a word that even when you say that word, that to me, that brings up some very specific experiences, and just brings up a whole lot of things. I love that word though, because fluency is like when you're fluent in something, you're speaking like a local. You're speaking natural. You're not thinking as hard. There's not as much of a pause or a delay in your language for it. So imagine the group of people you influence all having the same kind of level of fluency around this word leadership. I think that's so key. It's really important for us. So,
It's powerful, man.
yeah, so that's, and a lot of it comes down to that. You can't really commit to something you don't really fully comprehend, right? You can't dive all in and say,
Right.
wow, that totally aligns with who I am and my value system, and that's the kind of person I want to be, or that's what I want to accomplish too. So yeah, I'm with you in this journey, unless you really fully comprehend it and you all, can kind of fluently talk about the same thing. So,
Hmm.
so let's look at that. Let's unpack our third foundation of leadership here, which is in and of itself the definition of leadership, the way we define it here at Alignment Leadership. I think
Yeah.
we've got that we can put that on the screen. There we go. So our foundational principle number 3 here is that leadership is loving and serving others toward fulfillment. So the very end of that isn't on the screen there, but it's loving and serving others toward fulfillment. So um,
Right.
speaking of word association, there's a whole bunch of different ways we could take that. So let's dive deep into
Yeah.
this a little bit here. So what do you unpack
Yeah.
that
Let's
for
do
us,
it.
Graylin? Loving and serving.
Yeah. So loving and serving. And again, these are words that you don't always hear within a professional context. So you
Right.
hear serving more frequently, more often than you will hear loving. And so
Yeah,
um,
servant
it,
leadership.
it's
Yeah.
it's new,
Mm-hmm.
right. There's been a lot of information, content, books, that are coming out about servant leadership specifically.
Yeah.
But then you add on this other layer of the ultimate way to serve someone in loving them, and then you add on this additional layer of towards fulfillment.
Hmm.
Is it really is it's been revolutionary in what we've been trying to create,
Mm-hmm.
and what we've been working so diligently, with other leaders that we've been serving, um, to lay this out. So when you think of loving, serving's easier, I would say that. But when you
Yeah.
think of loving someone, oftentimes I think of loving as like those selfless acts. When you kind of
Mm-hmm.
move yourself out of maybe the driver's seat as the person, or the thing that we're pursuing, and you put something else there, put
Mm-hmm.
another individual there. And what does that look like in a professional environment? And that is, I think it can be defined and really exampled in a lot of different ways, but that's what we're going for, where I am so committed to serving this individual that I am going
Mm-hmm.
to remove myself maybe as the point of focus in my interest, to ensure that they meet, their potential fulfillment. And then fulfillment, man. Fulfillment is
Yeah.
another big piece of it. That's another keyword within our organization, and the definitions that we, as alignment leadership, have made extremely integral in everything that we do. This is the foundational principle, and I'll read it out loud. Just the deep satisfaction in achievement and accomplishment through the development of one's
Mm-hmm.
inner character.
Yeah.
Deep satisfaction and achievement, and again, it's tied to someone's inner character.
Yeah.
And so back, this is probably months ago, we were at an MSBU back when we had those. It was like our for those of you listening who aren't familiar with us, we had we were a leadership development company for another organization back in the day, but we we put on these events and we made them open to the community, and other leaders would find us on LinkedIn and they would show up. And so I remember being at the end of a conference and meeting a person who was not connected to our organization at all. And he asked me the question, so what makes you guys different than any other leadership development company?
Hmm.
And
Wow,
when
that's
you're
a
put
good
on the
question.
spot, it's like, oh man, what's what's our tagline? What's our slogan, our
Yeah.
elevator pitch? And the only thing I can think of right in the moment is the difference between us and other organizations, that we are doing our best to lead towards fulfillment and not
Mm-hmm.
engagement. And so he went on to ask another great question, and is like, okay, well, explain the difference. And
Yeah.
the
What do you mean
quickest
by
way
that?
I could explain the difference was that, I'm telling you, man, I was like, oh God, this guy is
Yeah.
deep. And he was so just needed. I appreciated it afterwards, because like, this is
Oh
what we
yeah,
need. If you're going to sell a product, if you're going to promote principles, man, you got to be able to talk about them.
that's
And so the
right.
quickest way I can explain it is like, oftentimes engagement is linked to some sort of external incentive. And
Yeah.
that could be, the fully stocked break room. That could be bonuses at the end of the year. This could be really cool parties, a cigarette break. Those are like, I'll do right because they're going to engage me in maybe some of these interests I have. But
Yeah.
fulfillment, as we define it, is connected to something that is internal. And so it
Yeah.
makes it long standing. It really provides an opportunity for someone, even if I, as the leader of an organization, don't meet your needs, because your fulfillment is tied to something that is inside of you,
Hmm.
there's still an opportunity to be fulfilled. And so
Yeah.
that was one of the kind of the aha moments I had in having to articulate this back to someone else outside of our organization.
Yeah. Man. And that's, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall in that conversation, because it's, I love seeing you put on the spot like that. Also because you're full of wisdom, man, and sometimes it just takes someone to ask you the right question and just to draw out these things that are in you naturally. That I just love being around it when you're there to share it. So when I think of that intrinsic
Thanks, man.
motivation, you're talking about engagement. That's interesting. It makes me think about how it's true. A lot of the things that I see in trends of keeping people engaged are these kind of surface level things that we think we need to stay interested in something, but are kind of like fleeting. Um, I don't know, fleeting desires. Like they don't keep us like connected very long, And some of the like things that you
Mhm.
mentioned are certainly related to like perks or benefits or things in company cultures and organizations that people do a lot these days. But I think even with the work itself, oftentimes it's like we've all been in roles where we're doing things that maybe we find kind of interesting, maybe, and kind of excited about it. And then
Mhm.
there's after a while, it's like it's not. Maybe we're ready for something new. I think that happens all the time. So. What can shift though with this fulfillment thing, that what we're talking about here is something even deeper. It's something that can take even the most menial, is that the right, menial task, right? um, the most menial
Yeah.
task, and make it meaningful when you see something like a bigger picture to
Yeah.
it, when you see this profound purpose to it, when you're able to connect something even of your own personal core beliefs or values to it. It's now like, wow, okay, I'm
Right.
I'm motivated to do this thing because I see it, like it benefits somebody else, or I see this profound impact that it has, even though it's like this, this really nitty gritty kind of menial task. There's something it like unlocks in us. I think that intrinsic motivation you're talking about, that keeps me feeling more fulfilled in the work versus just kind of surface level engaged. So yeah, I love that. And actually, and if we could put that, um, let's put that definition back up on the screen, because I think there's really like two parts here that I think are really neat to kind of look at. And I think, because I think there's another thing about fulfillment that we can't deny, and that's the fact that just I think we're all also really hardwired for accomplishment, like for really doing great things, for achieving great
Right.
things. We all want to, and that's also, like, I mean, when you think about any team you've ever been on, that's one of the, I think, the great experiences of teamwork is when you get a win together, right? When you can celebrate
Right.
accomplishment
Right.
and achievement. And so that's why it's in this definition, is like, well, we're not going to deny the fact that we all want to win. We all want to, like, man, accomplish great things together. Um, but what is the
Yeah.
key is that it's like these achievements and accomplishments are connected to character formation. So um,
Right.
I don't know. Like, have you ever been in a place in your life, Graylin, where you feel like you've done something great, you've accomplished something, but at the end of the day, you're still like by yourself, feeling like, well, okay, but I didn't do that with anybody, or maybe you accomplished something at the expense of a relationship. Like, I know I didn't tell you I was going to
Mm.
ask you that question, but I don't know. Do you have any experiences like that?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think, man. Man, that's a great question, Josh. I think I think the times I experienced, maybe a feeling of accomplishment,
Mhm.
it was, and not really felt fulfilled by, checking the list or the box, was when I was doing something in isolation. When I was
Mhm.
working, I would, if I was working through appraisals or something like that. I was an
Yeah.
assistant principal for a while, and I remember like just having a list, and it became a list of or dates on the calendar where I needed to get in a classroom, check off these, whatever these indices, these measures were in this appraisal
Mm.
system that I was looking at, uh, all the while missing this incredible teacher educate kids. I was so focused on completing the
Uh-huh.
list of things to do that I missed someone, really living out fulfillment in their just, their commitment to educating and to teaching. And I got to the end of it, and it's like, man, I want to go back in that classroom, but because I get so busy, or because the deadline is coming, you miss the opportunity to really see someone just kind of serve from that inner character. Like, these teachers were there
Yeah.
in the midst of incredible adversity at times,
Yeah.
crazy deadlines, but teaching, you know, educating, the kids. This is an
Yeah.
amazing opportunity to educate students, from their heart, from just a place that, only comes from like true purpose and dedication.
Yeah.
And it's like you get so busy that you miss the magic of
Yeah.
someone, living out their
Yeah.
purpose, um, just for it
So
to check the boxes. So yeah, I could.
so if
Yeah,
you yeah, that's a great example. So if you had noticed her in a different way, what do you think would have been different about the end result that you experienced?
I think just looking back on the how I showed up to these spaces was like with a clipboard ready to scribe, or again, just looking at the boxes versus like,
Yeah.
you know figuring out a way to truly be engaged in
Yeah.
watching this teacher like live out mastering, their craft, and creating an incredible experience for these students. um, and there's ways to do that if you're like intentional about that, and
Yeah.
intentional about, what, when I get in this room, although I have to complete these things, I'm going to do my best to see this individual. So what do I need to do beforehand, just to
Yeah.
show up in this space and to actually see this person, so I can truly affirm them? Like, man, I saw the passion that you were communicating. I saw you connecting with this individual in a
Yeah.
powerful way, versus you hit your objective, you hit the learning target for the day, all of those things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and
yeah,
and
man.
there so it's tapping this, and that's exactly why we put this in this definition, because it's tapping into this thing that I think when you that maybe without knowing it, maybe without putting it into exact words, there was something in you as a leader that you would want your accomplishment and achievement to also be connected to some aspect um, uh, of your character transforming too, right? I think when we think about the worst forms of our
Hmm.
personal failures, it's usually connected to a relationship with someone, right? It's usually connected to like a failure on
Right.
like in I guess you could say in a moral sense or something. We all have some sort of moral, some sort of compass that kind of guides like why we do what we do. And usually our worst forms of failure, I think, are
Hmm.
connected to those moments where we're like, oh, I here's what I did, and that person was totally depleted, or that person was I didn't even
Right.
notice. I didn't even notice that person in the room. And gosh, like the
Yeah,
moments where we
without a doubt.
fail, where it's just kind of
Without a
like
doubt.
somewhat like out of our control, you know what I mean? Like this pandemic, right? It's like, well, here's what we were doing. We were striving hard to do this thing, but gosh, like who could predict a pandemic? I mean, that's no one's fault. You know what I mean? And that's still, we've even through this season as we've been trying to navigate it, we've been like, gosh, this just feels like we're failing here, but it's a little bit of an easier failure to get over
Yeah.
than the ones where you're like, man, I just accomplished something great, but wow, now I have 3 different relationships I have to repair because, gosh, there's tension and that's
Right.
awkward. Um,
Or
well,
you
so in the
miss an
spirit of
opportunity.
authenticity,
Yeah, that's
I'll,
exactly
I'll
right.
share a story from mine so you're not the only one exposed here. Side note, we do want to build an authentic community here on Align Online. So share your stories, so we can respond and respond to ours too. Years ago, I was directing this organization that did youth programming for this company of international schools. There were 6 schools across this country, and I was working to develop programming to kind of bring all these schools together, and because get them all kind of working together, even though they're spread across different cities across this nation. And I was stepping into the role, and I remember just working so hard to like formulate these student workshops and programming and curriculum, and I branded it all, and it's all just looking so sweet, and it's just like, man, I'm loving this. It's coming together, and based upon kind of my own assessment of like, what I thought these schools needed. And one of my first presentations, I'm down there presenting to the head principal of this school in a different city, head principal, their finance director, a couple of their key leadership. And I'm like halfway through my presentation, and this head principal, she's awesome. She's actually a friend of mine today, but we didn't really know each other as well back then, and just kind of cuts me off and just kind of steps in, and it's just like, so this may sound great for maybe some other place, but really this doesn't meet the need we're talking about. And she was really kind of, really direct, really pointed, and in a nutshell was basically like, if this is your plan to serve our campus, like, I don't think I'll ever invite you back. And just kind of confronts it.
Wow.
Right there in the middle of this meeting. So there I am, like, doing this presentation to people, and like, oh gosh, well, this is really awkward now. What do I do? It was such a like swallow your pride kind of moment. It was really like I had no other choice. Like, swallow my pride and admit it, and just kind of learn to, I was humbled in that moment. But it was like, that was really the only way to get through a moment like that. But what it made me realize was this kind of experience is I had pushed through, worked with some people from a marketing team, people on my own team, to really like put together these resources and make them look all good, and I'm feeling like accomplished and feeling like achievement. But what I didn't do is I wasn't a good listener. I didn't actually tune in to the people who I really needed to listen to. I didn't seek input. There was aspects of like, I'm really trying to just prove myself or achieve something while leaving the most important people like behind. And it was such a transformational experience for me that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. Like, it was a train wreck. It was a massive failure of like, man, I can achieve and accomplish, but at the end of the day, it doesn't actually serve the people I'm supposed to be serving. What good is it? It really was like this epiphany of like, whoa. So that's why, to talk about fulfillment in the word leadership, it's so key. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say leadership has to look like something different. There's a whole lot of different definitions out there. There's, for every single, person you meet, you're probably going to find a different definition. But for us, we're not saying it's, necessarily the perfect way or right way, but it's our way of defining leadership, because we've seen how it can create a different result in the way that you lead and in the experience that you create for your people that you influence. And so that's what we're trying to do, is say, what if leadership, instead of trying to, fall into some other prototype that is out there, is really more about learning your people, finding out what brings them fulfillment personally, professionally. They all have those hidden hopes and desires in there somewhere, and loving and serving them toward that end. In the work they do. I think often, like, it's easy to probably look at this definition and assume that somehow by doing this and living this out, it's going to pull you away from like the profitability or the bottom line of your company. But we're trying to say, no, actually, you're going to get both. If you pursue your people in this way, you lead your people toward fulfillment in this way, you're going to get the best work they could ever do for you. And that's definitely going to impact, in a positive way, it's going to impact the bottom line.
Man, I'm so glad you said that, because it was kind of like, again, we're always tying this back to, because these principles seem almost kind of countercultural
Yeah.
in a professional environment, but fulfillment will ultimately impact the bottom line for those who are looking at the bottom line, because
Yeah.
fulfilled people who want to to be there, people who are interested in
Yeah.
producing from a place of their intrinsic value and their purpose, will do incredible things for
Oh
your
yeah.
organization, and for not just your organization's productivity, but like the people and the culture
Hmm.
of your organization.
Yeah.
So it's, man, it, it it's so valuable
Yeah.
and necessary. It's not easy, again, but it is something that is so worth it. If we as
Yeah.
leaders of organizations, you need to place focus and emphasis on this.
Yeah.
So, man, it's a fantastic story. Something that kind of jumped out to me as you were telling the story, and I've experienced this personally when I have missed an opportunity. I thought, man, did you get an opportunity to salvage, that relationship,
Oh
or
yeah.
um,
That's a good question.
present something else, another
Yeah.
proposal, you know, um,
Uh-huh.
because that's not always the case when we miss an opportunity to
Yeah.
love and serve someone.
You
It's
know
like
what? The
gone with the
cool
wind.
thing about that scenario is my relationship with that woman, that head principal, actually became the strongest of all the principals across this
Hmm.
company of schools. Our relationship ended up being the strongest throughout the year, because I was like, wow, here's someone who's willing to shoot straight with me, which you know my personality. That's actually my preference. I love when people are actually like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say exactly what I'm thinking, because I'm like, good, because now that you know what I'm thinking and I know what you're thinking, we can actually do something. Um, so I don't know. That's part of the East Coast kid
Yes.
in me, and she was from South Africa, so you can imagine, communication styles were a little bit like, we're gonna be direct with each other. But that relationship became the strongest of all of them. So I went back. I was like, gosh, I've got a lot to learn. Um, I was, a young kid trying to prove myself. So I went back and I
Mm.
was like, man, that was so humbling. What am I gonna do? And just, yeah, spent more time talking to her. Even asked her for advice, like, okay, what do I do? How do I'm hearing you, and what do I do differently? And she gave me a few tips, and so she kind of mentored me a little bit in that area, and it went along. And I feel like actually it improved overall relationships with the schools that I was trying to, impact and influence. And it came back with a different
Yeah.
plan, different way forward. Said, okay, well, sounds like this certain programming we were planning to do really doesn't, meet the need. So let's do something different. So ended up intaking, advice and intaking like ideas from each of these schools to say, tell us what to do differently, and then basically just represented back to them the ideas that they all gave me. And of course it's like, yeah, that's what we want you to do. That's
Hmm.
perfect. So yeah, it was like
Yeah.
a hard experience and humbling, but it was salvaged, and ended up being one of my, favorite people I've ever worked with, just because she was a sharp thinker. She was a direct communicator, and was like, hey, if yeah, you work hard and you go at it and you do it for the right reason and you're serving these students in the right way, I'm gonna back you with everything that I can
Hmm.
too, with all the resources I have to help you be successful. So it created a really great partnership. So
You said it about 3 or 4 times, and kind of just recounting that story. Is it required humility,
yeah.
and man, I think that is just it's crucial in loving and serving anybody. Is there's a level of humility um, that unlocks that opportunity to love and serve somebody. And I think so often, when we miss an opportunity, or we're called out for missing an opportunity, and this is kind of a sidebar, but like we respond, with pride or frustration or with anger,
Hmm.
and then like the opportunity to transform ends there. But
Yeah.
if we're humble, like just hearing you explain that, man, it just opened up not just the relationship between you and this leader, but your opportunity to work with her to serve a greater community and purpose. So, bro, that was it's again, that's a nugget, man. In order to love and serve someone, we just there's a level of humility that's required.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good.
And I think going back to even what you said earlier in the conversation, like loving, I like how you put a little bit of definition on that for me, because loving in the sense of like you're putting others' needs above your own, and you're kind of like elevating theirs and kind of just putting yours on, a lower tier for a moment, and just trying to see them, and hear them, and let their need be kind of more important than your own, I think is really critical. I agree with what you said earlier too, that the concept of loving is kind of a different countercultural feeling. To think about this in the workplace is like, how do I do that? I've heard about servant leadership, but I've not heard about loving leadership. Yeah, I think when I put this on the same kind of like trajectory of like, okay, how does so and so on my team define this fulfillment, this personal achievement and accomplishment through just this, the transformation, the development of their inner inherent character. Like, what is that for them? Like, that's going to require a lot of conversations, number one, to really unpack that.
Yeah.
If you just straight up ask someone, I doubt anyone out there is going to just spit back an answer and be like, "Oh, thanks, glad you asked. Here it is." But you unpack that, you explore it, you discover it, and then you're finding ways to be like, okay, now where are these subtle moments where their need on the path toward that fulfillment is, I need to put mine down a little bit, elevate theirs so that they can just take another step toward that. I don't know if you can think of any practical moments in a work setting, where that happens, where you have that opportunity. But I don't know. I'm going to try to think of one too.
Yeah. I think, just kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, if I walked into those classrooms with this mindset,
Yeah.
I would have shown up differently. I would have shown up prepared
Yeah.
to, you know, to be present,
Mm-hmm.
versus, prepared to take notes and just complete a task, check a box. And I think, it is difficult to do and it does require time and investment. So I think planning for it, planning to do this, planning
Mm-hmm.
to, live this out, in your interactions with people, in your meetings, over Zoom, you know, it, it, it requires a little bit of work, but that's the stretch. Like, this is one of those things that, we can provide you like the definitions and the on-ramp and even resources to help you do this. But there's a unique thing about, your leadership that has to figure out the best way to serve your people,
Mm-hmm.
and how to show up in this capacity. And it's something that, we're always learning, we're always practicing. It takes intention, and but it's so worth it
Totally.
when you do it, and
Totally.
as a person who's been the recipient of it, and had the opportunity to serve in this way, man, it's what keeps you waking up with, an optimism and an outlook, to serve
Mm.
and lead someone else that, fuels you. So
Yeah, that's good. Think of like a practical example for me. Just I tend to be a kind of a big picture, big thinker, kind of always full of ideas kind of guy. So one of the things that I know is, like if we're sitting down to think about how are we going to solve a problem, what's the best idea? Like, I tend to be that kind of domineering personality who will always have an opinion on everything and share an idea when it's like, oh, good, it's
yeah,
ideas sharing time. It's my favorite time. Let me unleash to you all the ideas I have that are perfect in every way. And so one of my tendencies is to do that and to just start plowing ground. You know what I mean? And so one of the things that I have tried to do, in the more recent years, since kind of really being more influenced by this mentality of leadership we have at Alignment Leadership, is really like trying to take note of like, oh my gosh, there's someone next to me at this table who is more reserved, who it would be, if you think about this connection to fulfillment and the development of their character and this aspect of like, man, there's I know there's an aspect of their character of courage that they're working on. They're trying to be, because they voiced it to me. I remember a person on our team in the past who was like, she was trying to be more vocal because she knows she holds back. You know what I mean? So I know that she's on a journey of trying to transform. She's trying to be better in that way and not to be just always go with the flow, but to actually raise her voice and say, well, I do have an opinion. And so it's like when I know that, and I know that she's pursuing that, and there's an aspect of like fulfillment for her that, let's say she voices an idea, it leads toward like us, like, well, yeah, that just shaped our direction in a new way, and now we've achieved and accomplished something based on that transformation of her character. I can elevate that for a moment and say, either hold back ideas for a moment just to wait and see, like, is she gonna jump in there, or even just invite it and say, hey, I want to hear from you. Get your voice out there. It matters. Making space, so that's one of the things. It's just, that's a really simple way, but one way I've tried to make space to say, because I value that person, and that's like, so a leadership example, I guess, for me is like, man, how, and especially when it's connected to, it's not just about creating an equity of voice of like, let's make sure everyone at the table has a voice. That's awesome too, but it's even further than that for me. It's like this transformation aspect of like, man, because when there's this equity of voice, and by me like holding back, that person has an opportunity to transform, and maybe, who knows, like maybe that just increases her courage or her boldness, that maybe down the road, like maybe that's just like the beginning, and down the road, it's going to lead towards something greater. So I just think I just love this
So
definition, because it just creates this it creates like a really big picture of like, imagine a culture in your organization where people are being led in this way. They're being led toward fulfillment. They're being led toward a transformation of their character, and those are the things being celebrated. I mean, imagine what that'll do for your own team, your own organization, but even imagine the stories that you might hear years down the road, right? The people coming back to you saying, hey, here's where I'm at now. I never would have saw myself getting to this place in my own personal development or my own career. And I associate this accomplishment to the influence you had on me as when you were my leader. I mean, to me, I can't think of any better win personally,
nothing like that.
To think about like hearing people years down the road. I want to be old, and I want to be having stories of people saying, hey, you made my life better. Like, I was a better person because of your influence. Like, I would rather have those accomplishments than whatever other things the world can offer, I guess.
Man.
So.
So good. And one thing that keeps coming to mind is that this is possible regardless of your industry.
Yeah.
It is possible to invest in people this way, regardless of your industry, because it comes from your desire to serve another human being. Like, regardless of the industry, regardless of what's on your plate, what's on the calendar, man, if you set out with this priority to love and serve people, man, you can make an impact, a lasting impact that leads to fulfillment in someone's life. Again, regardless of the industry that you're in, it's really powerful. It's exciting. And that's a huge goal. And I think, as I know we're getting ready to close here, but you're just kind of reminding me, and I've been on the school kick since we started the conversation today, but man, there's something so powerful.
It's a good kick. It's good.
About students seeking you out to tell you the impact, or coworkers. Man, it feels great, especially when you don't realize you were doing it. You weren't doing it for any accolade. This is just, you saw something in someone, you took the time to invest in that individual, and then they're released to become, all of the, the things that, they have inside of them, the promise that they have inside of them. And when that person comes back to share that with you, it's like, oh, it's just a powerful reminder, like, man, these conversations are worth it.
Yeah.
These moments of, and you do a good job of this, creating space are
Yeah.
worth it, because man, you don't know the impact, the investment that you're making in someone, and how you're really serving them towards something that's going to
Yeah.
continue to develop this intrinsic value that's already present, but
Yeah.
ultimately lead towards their fulfillment. So
That's so good. I mean,
so good, man.
it's like it's
It's a good
reshaping.
idea.
It's reshaping our definitions, redefining leadership for all of us, and it's putting us on this path where we can look back
Mhm.
and say, "Well, I don't have regrets, and I'm not alone." You know, like we lead in a way
Mhm.
that maintains this, this community around us. Even if people like leave the organization, or we come and go. That's just a trend in the society we live in. We move around. People move
Yeah.
around a lot. And geographically they're moving around a lot, especially here in Central Texas. Like, I don't even know, probably 50% of my neighborhood's not from Texas, right? So I mean, people move around a lot. But
Right.
you can
Right.
have this like history of relationships and influence that like it never fades. You take it with you. And that's what we want to do. We want to lead in a
Yeah.
way that we're not leading in a way that leaves us feeling regretful and lonely. We're leading in a way that is loving and serving others toward fulfillment, so that you know um, we feel even more deeply fulfilled by leading in that way too. So yeah, so there's our
Yeah.
third foundation. So um, everyone can lead and should lead. Everyone has intrinsic value. And when you believe those things, then it makes sense to define leadership in this way, that leadership is loving and serving others toward
Right.
fulfillment. So those are the three foundational principles. We're going to unpack the fourth one next week. But
Mhm.
let's challenge our community here again this week with a call to action, and leave them with that.
Yeah.
So, okay, we got a comment here.
Oh, cool.
I want to take a couple of seconds to look at this.
Yeah.
Reminds me of something Bob Goff wrote:
Yeah. Go
invest in
for it.
things that last. Yeah. If you have to choose between projects and people, pick people every time. Projects work or they don't. Loving people lasts. Of all the things we accomplish in this life, only love remains. Go big on love and let the rest work itself out. There you go. That's yes. Yeah. Drop.
Drop
My
the
God.
mic.
That's so good. Um,
Hey, thank you for that comment. Whoever
yeah.
put that in, we love that stuff, man. So good.
Yeah, I really that is powerful, because it's true. I mean, I think I'm young. Like, I guess I'm technically past my mid 30s, but I haven't worked for like a ton of organizations, but let me think, 4 or 5 since college, right? And so you think about the things that
Mhm.
last. I think I spend less time thinking about the things I did, right, in past roles and responsibilities, and a lot more time thinking about people, and like, how did I leave them, like the ones that were great, and you had that impact, and you're
Yes.
like, man, it feels good that I know I've got a friend on the other side of the world, because we work together, and you did great things together, but you also just had a great influence, right? Versus those things from the past where you're like,
Oh yeah.
I hope I never run into that person again, right? So no
Oh
regrets,
man.
no
Oh yeah.
loneliness, lead in a way that loves and serves people toward fulfillment. And that's across any organization, that's in your families, that's in your friendships. This is an applicable life principle. So yeah, thanks for that comment. So here's the call to action. For those, again, this is not industry specific either, and you could apply this to your personal life and your family as well.
Right.
But if we're talking about how leadership is loving and serving others toward fulfillment, and we gave you a definition of fulfillment, which, if we can put that back up on the screen. Um, think about the people that you influence in your circle of influence. Again, personal,
Mhm.
professional, doesn't matter. Do you know how the people in that circle of influence define fulfillment? Do you know what to them would be a great achievement and accomplishment connected to a transformation of their character in some way? Do you know what they're kind of maybe secretly hoping for or pursuing? Maybe they've articulated it and they're pursuing it right now and you don't know it. Maybe you do. Or maybe they even haven't articulated it for themselves because no one's ever really sought it out. No one's asked them a good question to draw it out of them. So your call to action is to think about that. Who in your circle of influence, who is in your circle of influence? And once you have those faces there, do you know how they define fulfillment? If you don't, find out. Go find out how they define fulfillment. What are they pursuing? Because you can't love them and serve them toward that end unless you know what they're pursuing.
Man, that's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It's going to take some work, but man, it's so valuable. So good, man.
That's true. So share your stories of success, stories of lament if you need to, and let's keep just pushing each other along and encouraging one another. That's what this online community is for. So, all right. Well, one last quick plug for GLS. If you haven't signed up, glsaustin.com. Get your tickets. It's right around the corner. And looking forward to next week when we unpack our fourth foundation of leadership. We're talking about authentic community and how truth and transformation is discovered and experienced in authentic community. So come back next week to unpack the fourth foundational principle of leadership. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.